Istanbul is a city of saints, scholars, and secret places. Among its lesser-known figures stands Ismail Maşuki, a 17th-century Sufi poet and thinker whose life connects Ottoman spiritual currents with a small evocative shrine, Kayalar Mescidi. Today we trace the contours of his thought, the world he lived in, and the shrine that bears his memory, separating verifiable history from the layers of local tradition that gathered around him. To understand Ismail Maşuki, step into 17th century Istanbul, a city still reverberating from the long Ottoman classical age. The empire's political center remained at Topkapi, while spiritual life flourished in tekkes, madrasas, and private circles. Sufism, keen in its many orders, especially the Khalwati, Mevlevi, and Bektashi strains, shaped popular piety and elite devotion alike. It is in this environment of devotional intensity, poetry, and mystical inquiry that Ismail Maşuki's reputation takes root. The historical record on Ismail Maşuki is fragmentary. He is attested in Ottoman biographical sources and local vakıf, endowment records, as a dervish and poet active in the late 16th and early 17th centuries. Contemporary chroniclers and later local histories describe him as a man of ascetic habit, known for devotional poetry and teachings that emphasized love of God, humility, and the inner path. His nisba, Maşuki, hints at a spiritual epithet. Maşuk in Persian and Ottoman Turkish often refers to the beloved, a Sufi term equating the mystic's beloved with the divine. Thus, Ismail Maşuki functions as both name and title, indicating a self-understanding as a lover of God, someone whose identity was formed in the language of mystical union. Maşuki's thought reflects the broader Sufi milieu of his time. Key influences include classical Persian Sufis such as Rumi and Attar, whose imagery of divine love and annihilation in the beloved informed Ottoman devotional poetry. Early Ottoman currents that balanced ecstatic experience with sobriety, saw, and practices associated with orders like the Naqshbandi and Khalwati, which foregrounded disciplined retreat and silent remembrance, zikr. The poems and sayings attributed to Maşuki, preserved in local anthologies, and the oral memory attached to Kayalar Mescidi, stress an ethics of love. Love as transformative, love as the path to knowledge of God, and love that dissolves ego. His language is often metaphorical, the wine of divine intoxication, the mirror of the heart, the flame that consumes and purifies. Kayalar Mescidi, literally the rock masjid, is a small masjid or neighborhood shrine that functioned as a focal point for local devotional life. Historically, such small complexes served as places for the 5 daily prayers, private council, and gatherings of a dervish circle. Architecturally, Kayalar Mescidi follows the modest typology of Ottoman neighborhood mescids, a single prayer hall, a simple mihrab, often a small courtyard, and in cases associated with a saint, a turbi, or commemorative niche nearby. Endowment deeds, vakfiye, linked to such sites show how they were sustained. Revenues from shops, fountains, or estates dedicated to maintenance, food for visitors, and sometimes to supporting a resident dervish or teacher. Local tradition links Ismail Maşuki to Kayalar Mescidi in 2 overlapping ways, as founder or benefactor, and as the spiritual figure whose tomb or relics are kept on the site. Documentary evidence in some instances confirms that a vakıf was established in Maşuki's name, or that donations were recorded for the upkeep of a meshed associated with his circle. Oral histories, while later and more fluid, recount that Maşuki taught there, received visitors, and that his council drew both commoners and minor officials. It is important, though, to distinguish what can be verified from pious elaboration. The existence of a vakıf record and the mesjid itself are archival facts. Miracles, specific visions, or sweeping assertions of wonders attributed to Maşuki more properly belong to hagiographic tradition, stories intended to convey spiritual truth and encourage devotion rather than to serve as strict historical documentation. From the poems and sayings attributed to Ismail Maşuki and from testimony preserved among his followers, several recurring themes illuminate his spiritual outlook. First, divine love as transformative. Maşuki frames the spiritual journey primarily in terms of love. This is not mere sentimentality, but a doctrine. Love is the force that breaks the self's enclosure and reveals the divine presence. Second, the mirror of the heart. Consistent with Sufi metaphors, Maşuki emphasizes polishing the heart. Purification, remembrance, and moral discipline make the heart capable of reflecting divine light. Third, union through annihilation and service. Echoing classical Sufi paradoxes, he speaks of fana, annihilation of the ego, and baka, subsistence in God, while balancing these contemplative aims with a call to social responsibility, feeding the poor, offering counsel, and humble service. Fourth, symbolic use of everyday objects. Maşuki's poetry often employs commonplace images, marketplaces, ships on the Bosphorus, lamps, and wine, to render spiritual truths accessible to lay listeners. This grounded symbolism helped his teachings travel beyond scholarly circles and enter the vernacular imagination. Figures like Ismail Maşuki operated in neighborhoods and networks rather than in imperial lecture halls. They played mediating roles, counseling families, composing occasional poetry, interceding in local disputes, performing rites, and serving as moral exemplars. Over the centuries, such figures were remembered in local histories, compendia of saints, and annual commemorations known as anma or ziyaret at their shrines. Kayalar Mescidi, as a locus of Maşuki's memory, became a place where devotees gathered on the anniversary of his death to recite his verses, perform zikr, and seek blessings. These practices preserved his legacy even when formal scholarship largely neglected him. A historically rigorous approach requires caution. Primary sources for Maşuki's life are limited to vakıf deeds, occasional mentions in Ottoman biographical dictionaries, and later hagiographies compiled by local scholars. Oral tradition fills gaps but can accrete legendary material across generations. What we can assert with confidence is that a Sufi figure known as Ismail Maşuki existed and was associated with a mesjid called Kayalar, that he composed devotional poetry and attracted a following, and that Kayalar Mescidi functioned as a neighborhood center with an attached endowment. What must be treated as pious elaboration are miraculous. Interventions attributed to Maşuki without contemporaneous corroboration and precise biographical details such as exact birth dates or itineraries unless documented. In archival sources, Ismail Maşuki's significance lies less in doctrinal innovation and more in exemplifying the lived spirituality of Ottoman Istanbul. He represents how Sufi thought permeated everyday life, not confined to courtly circles or elite madrasas, but shaping neighborhoods, language, and moral imagination. Kayalar Mescidi stands as a material trace of that spirituality, a modest building that anchors collective memory, social welfare, and a pattern of devotion. In contemporary Istanbul, sites like Kayalar offer continuity amid rapid urban change, spaces where past and present meet. When you visit Kayalar Mescidi or read Ismail Maşuki's verses, listen for a voice that speaks in the ordinary language of love and service. His teachings invite a practice that is at once inward, purifying the heart, and outward, caring for neighbors. In a city of grand monuments, it is figures like Maşuki and their small shrines that remind us how spirituality is woven into daily life.